Vodacom Group, operating primarily in South Africa, its largest market, plans to trim its workforce. We understand that they're looking to cut about 80 jobs in a cost-cutting measure, according to the wireless provider. Also, as far as the number of employees they've got across the board, we're looking at about 5,400 of them, and about 80 across the full company is what they plan to cut. Now, that's Vodacom. Some other news. With respect to a study by the Center for the Future of Democracy at the University of Cambridge, reveals a growing preference amongst developing nations that were surveyed for China over the United States. Also, in the same poll, about 72% of respondents in South Africa say they prefer an unelected leader, as long as that leader would provide jobs and also reduce crime. So interesting numbers coming from there. And also the Johannesburg Stock Exchange is looking to begin trading carbon credits by April or May. This according to the CEO of JSE Limited, that houses the most capitalized exchange on the African continent. Joining us to discuss, Clement Izu is the head of research at Financial Derivatives Company Limited. Clement, you're very welcome. Good morning to you.
My pleasure.
So, let's start with these poll numbers coming from the Center for Democracy at Cambridge University here. That same poll, I think they said about 62% of respondents are more favorable to China versus 61% to the US. You know how China runs its government, communists versus the United States, where democracy is practiced. 72% of people in that poll, South Africans, saying they would pick an unelected leader who, as long as he or she reduces crime and provides jobs, they're fine with it. So it's suggested that income inequality needs to be somehow reduced in order for people to believe that democracy is working. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think the view is not out of place, because the primary responsibility of government and governance is to provide livability for the people, improve the quality of life. Yeah. Nobody cares whether is democracy or not if they have improvement in the quality of life. But democracy offers the platform to optimize those values, to optimize those expectations. Yeah. But oftentimes, especially in Africa, we've seen democracy abused, right? Giving people opportunity to do whatever they want and get away with it. And that's why you see there's a reorientation. If you look at China, you discover that in the last decade, China has done magic, taking more than 400 million people, twice the population of Nigeria, out of poverty. Yeah. And it's not an example of a democracy. And people begin to ask, is it not better for me to be in that economy and get value than to be in democracy and do not get value? Those are some of the things. But we also will remember, when you begin to compare the progress in China with that of the US, we also remember that the issue of growth elasticity is there. China has so much idle resources to explore, and that's why you see that rapid growth. Now you begin to see China growth retarding. The US has entered into an age of secular retardation, because there's an age you get to in growth, then the rate of growth will begin to moderate and become very slow to add up because of the marginal growth possibilities for you. You're already on your possibility frontier curve, so that opportunity will not be there so much. But the fact is this: inequality is getting worse. The world and that's why you're seeing migration everywhere. And you see this migration, you discover that this migration is more from the south to the global north, right? Because the global north is just 21% of the world population, but they control about 74% of global wealth, And so it's not just one is inequality within people, but also inequality between countries, right? Now, when we're talking about inequality within people, if you look at countries like Nigeria, Africa in general, and Asia, you discover there is dearth of opportunities for people to thrive. And that's what, for example, look, we have inflation, 2021, 22, 23, 24 is still. Are you aware that the Oxford report says the rich have made more money at this time, almost doubled their wealth in this decade between 2020 and now? They've doubled their wealth. But they say Oxford did a mathematics. It said 5 richest have doubled their wealth between 2020 and now. It said 5 million poorest have lost wealth, have fallen in their wealth quintile, right? Why? Because when you have inflation, the rich benefits, they have the access. Look at stock market gaining 40% in just how many months? But the poor have wage stagnation, right? And that makes it difficult. Today we're talking about minimum wage and all of that. What is the take home of an average working class? And that's why about 1,500 companies have sacked their workers in 2024. Tech companies have sacked about 46,000 workers, right? And then the question is, why would they be sacking workers when they know their economic crisis? Of course, we know when you have economic meltdown, there is cyclical unemployment. That unemployment is because there is demand deficiency. The company is struggling, and so what it does is to sack. Well, why will the company sack? Are there no other options for it to reduce costs?
Right, exactly.
But the thing is, you go back to Karl Marx. He says you have the capitalist, the bourgeoisie, and then you have the proletariat, the working class. The working class are commoditized. You look at them as commodities, right? And so it's about what they can offer. You can hire them and fire them. The capitalism is about creating more value for the owners of the business. So the person who is at the margin is the worker who you can relieve of his job in order to create more value for. Because if about 2021, 2022, the biggest firms, global firms, have increased their profit by 89%. Then the question is, why are they now sacking workers? They can improve on processes, right, and other cost-cutting measures. They can reduce the bonuses of the big guys and all of that. But the question is this: the shareholders of those companies, if you begin to slack in giving them values, right, then they begin to shift from your company, they sell your shares, and they go to other companies. So you want to maximize value for the shareholders, and then the fallback becomes the workers. And that is why every country have social security nets, right, to protect the workers, right, and invest heavily, because in capitalism, you do what is best for business, not what is best for the country. We make that appeal that, okay, they do what is best for the country, but that's not how it works. So it is the responsibility of the state to make provisions for the citizens. It's not to dash them money. Today in Nigeria, we're talking about palliatives. Oh, share rice here.
You call it a palliative economy last time.
And that doesn't change anything, right? If we create value for the people, imagine that all of these things we're sharing, we say, okay, healthcare is free, no matter who. Or we say, okay, people within so income class, you access healthcare free. You have the money you should have been taking for healthcare has been released for you to go into gari and rice and all of that. And you say, okay, your education is free. Because when we say education is free in Nigeria, you don't buy textbook for these kids. How much is school fees in those government schools? You don't buy uniform for them. All right. So if we say entirely the child training is free, education is free, entirely free, we buy the books, we do. And then you have relieved them of that pressure, and then you can now concentrate on the food. If you are giving food subsidies, there are mechanisms to give food subsidies, right? But when you come once in 4 years and you have 1 cup of rice or 2 cups of rice to the people, it doesn't change anything. And the worst is that you don't even create value. If you take out maybe like, let's say, 100 people and say, let's empower them. Let's give them 5 million to start a business they can monitor. I have implemented a microcredit program for an NGO project sponsored by a German outfit, right? And we identify the people that need this money. Just more money they need. There are people that just 100,000 will change their life. And when we give them this money, we monitored it from the disbursement to the implementation. They put it into business. And we have a kind of a recycling scheme. And so after some time, you begin to pay back because we're going to give it to another person. But we are there with you to make sure that those things are put to work. And those people created value. You take them out of poverty. They take other people out of poverty. And you see that cycle, right? So we need to begin to focus on what works. It must be about policies that work, that can take people out of poverty by creating opportunities. Today, In Africa...
Clement, you see, this is why we got to have you more time. Real quick.
Yeah.
I have to talk, because we're about to go. And your point is well noted. Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the carbon credit trading. I know climate change is Africa is disproportionate. Yeah. So what just your quick thoughts on that?
No, that's in the right direction. You know, before what used to happen was the idea of taxing people, carbon tax, right, pollution abatement strategies, and all of that. But then that is not an incentive system. Yeah. The idea of carbon credit or carbon offset is, let's create an incentive system first. So if you reduce your carbon emission, then you get this credit. Yeah. But for it to work, it has to be tradable. Right. All right? So that tradability is what gives its essence. Yeah. And for some stuff like aviation, how do you reduce your carbon? Because the sustainable aviation fuel and all of that is still a project that is going to take years to materialize. But how do they reduce their carbon emission? Because they are very serious, and one of the strongest carbon emissions, they are closer there, and that is where all of these emissions are taking place, right? So if you can have a carbon offset, so okay, because I'm emitting these tons of carbon, I'm going to pay for tree planting that can take the same, so that I have carbon neutrality, right? Yeah. The same amount that I'm emitting. You offset it. Yeah. Now, if that is commoditized, if that is tradable, you have an incentive to have that go on its own, right? Yeah. And so all of these things are in the right direction. So we expect to have more of that, because the argument is that, Africa is emitting only 3%.
While China and India and US are emitting way more, and then they are impacting.
But the effect does not spare Africa, right? And so everybody must, we have nationally determined contribution. Yeah. We need to begin to focus on what do we do to mitigate and adapt in the case of climate change.
Clement, you see, this is why you're the head of research at Financial Derivatives Company Limited.
My pleasure.
You're doing good work, so thank you for the analysis. Clement, appreciate it.